Hook. You ever have one of those days where you wake up to the sound of tires crunching on your gravel driveway and before you can even pour your coffee, you're staring down two sheriff's deputies telling you your fence violates the neighborhood regulations? Only problem, I saw broken bar, you don't even live in a neighborhood, you live on a ranch, miles outside of town. That was the morning everything changed. That the morning I realized the HOA didn't just mess with the wrong man, a broken bar, they messed with the wrong rancher. The sun had barely climbed over the ridge when I heard the crunch of tires. Out here, that sound means one of three things: a friend, a delivery, or trouble. My dog, Scout, was already barking by the time I stepped off the porch, coffee steaming in my hand. Two white SUVs with county insignias rolled to a stop, doors opened, and out stepped two deputies, clean uniforms, mirrored sunglasses, and that stiff-bodied language that says, "This ain't the social call." "Morning," I said, keeping my tone light. "Something I can help you with?" The taller one, a kid, couldn't have been older than 30, adjusted his belt and said, "We got a complaint from the Homeowners Association. They say you've put up an unapproved structure, a fence." I almost choked on my coffee. "The HOA? Son, the nearest HOA is 5 miles that way," I said, pointing toward the highway. "This here is county land. Always has been." He glanced at his clipboard. "Address checks out. 219 Cedar Ridge." "That's my address," I said, "but I'm not part of any association. This land's been in my family for 3 generations. You're standing on the Wilson Ranch, not Cedar Ridge Estates." He frowned, clearly confused. His partner stayed silent, eyes scanning the open field behind me and the newly built fence that followed the line of the old one my father had put up 40 years ago. It was nothing fancy, just cedar posts and wire, built by my own hands after the last storm tore down the old one. "We're just following up," the deputy said. "The whole board sent in a formal complaint. Said you were encroaching on common property." "That did it," I laughed, not out of disrespect but disbelief. "Common property? You mean my pasture, the one my cattle graze on?" "Look around, son. You see any cookie-cutter homes, manicured lawns, or mailboxes with numbers that match?" He hesitated, realizing how ridiculous this sounded. "But procedure is procedure, and the man had to do his job." He handed me a paper, a notice stamped with some official HOA logo. It demanded I take down the fence within 10 days or face fines and potential legal action. I read it twice, then folded it neatly. "Well," I said, voice calm as a still pond, "you can tell the folks at the Cedar Ridge HOA they made a mistake. I'm not their member, and I sure as hell didn't ask for their approval to build on my own land." The younger deputy's eyes softened, like he knew it wasn't right. "Sir, I get it, but it'd help if you called them. Clear it up. They've been pretty aggressive lately with complaints." "Yeah," I said quietly, "I'll call them." When they left, I stood there for a while, the wind tugging at the paper in my hand. Scout sat at my feet, ears perked, tail twitching. He didn't understand the words, but he knew something was off. I looked across the field, at the horizon that had always felt like freedom, and for the first time, it felt a broken bar threatened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father, who used to say, "A man's land is his word. If you let someone tell you what you can do on it, you've already lost it." Those words echoed louder than the crickets outside. The next morning, I made that call. I spoke to a woman named Linda from the HOA. Her tone was polite but sharp, like someone used to winning arguments. She insisted my ranch fell within the extended zoning perimeter and that I was subject to community guidelines. When I told her she was mistaken, she said, "Sir, we'll see what the county records say. In the meantime, we expect compliance." That word, compliance, stuck in my chest like a splinter. I hung up and walked outside, staring at that fence again. My father's voice in my head, my grandfather's hands in the soil, and I knew, right then and there, that this wasn't about a fence anymore. This was about standing up for my land, my family's legacy, and for every person who's ever been bullied by someone waving a rule book they didn't write. The whole thought they could push me around. They had no idea who they were dealing with. 3 days passed before I heard from them again. 3 quiet days of feeding cattle, fixing the tractor, and pretending everything was normal. But deep down, I knew something was coming. Out here, peace never lasts long when pride and power get involved. It was a Thursday morning, a gray sky, cool air, smell of rain. Scout barked again, that same low warning growl he gave before strangers showed up. This time, it wasn't the deputies. It was two black SUVs and a silver sedan. The sedan door opened, and out stepped Linda, the HOA president. She was dressed like she'd walked out of a courtroom, blazer, clipboard, hair tight as a wire. Two men in suits followed, one with a camera, the other holding a measuring wheel. "Mr. Wilson," she called out, walking up my driveway with confidence that didn't belong out here. "We've come to inspect the structure and verify the property line. You've ignored our notice." I took a slow sip of my coffee, leaning against the porch post. "Ma'am, I told your people this isn't your jurisdiction. You're trespassing." She smiled tightly. "Actually, according to the Cedar Ridge expansion map, this parcel falls within our development's outer boundary. That makes it subject to HOA oversight." I handed her my own paper, an original deed, yellowed and worn, signed by my grandfather in 1956. "This says otherwise. This ranch was deeded long before Cedar Ridge even existed. My family built this land, and no committee's going to tell me what kind of fence to put up." Her eyes flicked to the paper, then to the cameraman, who was already filming. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Non-compliance can lead to legal consequences. That word again, a compliance." It hit me like a hammer. I looked at the horizon, the fence line cutting across my pasture like a scar, and something inside me hardened. "Lady," I said quietly, "I buried my father 50 yards from where you're standing. That fence marks where he built our first cattle pen. If you think some neighborhood board can erase that, you've lost your damn mind." Her jaw tightened. "We'll see what the county says." They left, but not before planting a bright orange flag in the dirt right in front of my gate. It read, "Violation under review." That flag burned in my mind all day. It wasn't about a rule or a mistake anymore. It was about disrespect. It was about the system so used to pushing people around that they didn't know what to do when someone pushed back. That evening, I drove into town to the county records office. The clerk, an old friend named Jeff, looked up when he saw me walk in. "Heard about your little HOA problem," he said, chuckling. "You stirring up trouble again?" "Not me," I said, "just trying to keep what's mine." We pulled up the county maps. Sure enough, Cedar Ridge's new development plan had drawn an expansion zone A1 that accidentally overlapped my property line by a few acres. Someone had redrawn boundaries without checking the original deeds, or maybe they did check and hoped I'd never notice. Jeff whistled low. "Looks like they tried to slide a ranch into their jurisdiction. Illegal as hell, if you ask me." I took photos of the documents, copies of the original plat map, and the old survey records. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with something older, righteous anger. By sunset, I'd sent everything to a local attorney I knew, a quiet man who'd fought his share of land disputes. He agreed to take the case. "These whole boards think they're small governments," he said over the phone. "It's about time someone reminded them where their power ends." The next week, things got ugly. Linda sent another notice, doubling down on the fines, $500 a day, plus threats of legal seizure if I refused to comply. Deputies showed up again, embarrassed, saying their hands were tied. The neighbors from Cedar Ridge drove by slowly, some filming, others pretending not to look. But then something happened I didn't expect. The story spread. A local reporter caught wind of the dispute and came out to the ranch. She interviewed me, took photos of the land, and asked why I wouldn't back down. I told her the truth. This isn't just about a fence. It's about a man's right to live free on his own land without being bullied by people with clipboards and fine print. The article went viral. Comments flooded in. Folks from all over the state, farmers, ranchers, even city folks tired of being bossed around by hosts, started reaching out. They shared their own stories, their own battles. Suddenly, it wasn't just my fight anymore. 2 weeks later, I walked into the county courthouse, hat in hand, boots covered in dust. Linda and her board were there, all polished and smiling. They thought they had this wrapped up neatly. But my lawyer laid out the evidence, the original maps, the forged expansion documents, and the timeline that proved they'd filed the paperwork without county approval. By the time he was done, the judge leaned back and said, "Mrs. Collins, you and your association have no legal authority over Mr. Wilson's property. In fact, you owe him damages for harassment and unauthorized trespass." The courtroom went silent. Linda's face went pale. I didn't gloat. I just tipped my hat, thanked the judge, and walked out. Outside, the sun was just rising over the hills, a golden light washing across my fence line. My fence, my father's fence. When I got home, the orange flag was gone. Scout ran along the pasture, barking like he understood we'd won. I stood there a long while, hand resting on the post, eyes on the horizon. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't about anger. It's about peace, the kind that comes when you refuse to be pushed 1 inch further than you should. So yeah, the HOA sent cops to my ranch. They thought they could scare me into silence, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't just defending land, I was defending freedom. And out here, a broken bar freedom still means something.